Okay, so welcome to the new world order. There's before now and there is now. We have FTX. We're in the middle of the FTX crisis. We got to talk about this shit. I meant to talk about it earlier, but frankly, things have been developing so quickly and to such a ridiculous and incredible extent. I was going to wait for things to level off a little bit, but it's been days and nothing is leveling off even a little bit. So I guess we'll just talk about the story so far. I mean, this is so crazy that, I mean, I kind of have a good timeline of everything that's happening in my head, but we're going to use a little Twitter thread that did a timeline analysis of this just to keep everything in order, and I'll link to this in the description. I think it's a really good recap so far of everything that we've seen. Probably a lot of you know a lot of the story so far, but in the next video we're going to see if we can predict some of the contagion that's already happening. We may as well start from the beginning. So if you're looking at this thread, it all kind of started around the 2nd of November when the Alameda research balance sheet was leaked. It was on a CoinDesk article. And then over the course of the next couple of days, kind of everything started to get, everyone was just kind of speculating at the significance of all of this, whether this was actually going to be a really big issue or not. And it started kind of as it usually does, with everybody denying that there's any problems, everything's going to be just fine. And then, then there's that infamous tweet around the 6th earlier this month of CZ, where he was looking at all this and going, well, they've apparently been gossiping to regulators behind our backs. And we'll come back to that because I think that's a really huge part of this story that we haven't quite seen the fallout of yet. But apparently FTX was talking to regulators behind their backs and they didn't like that. So they were going to sell their FTT token, which they were like amongst the first investors. So they had 2 billion FTT, which they were going to liquidate onto the market all at once. And so that just, this whole shitstorm, because FTT as a token doesn't have a lot of trading volume, right? On any given day, there's not a whole lot being sold. So if you liquidate 2.1 billion at once, FTT effectively goes, to zero. That screws their whole thing over. So Binance goes and does that. SBF just starts basically blustering and saying how he'll buy all the SOL you can offload at $3 or whatever, and he keeps trying to reassure people that things are going to be okay. And then CZ says, "Well, look, our liquidating our FTT is just a post-exit risk. It's just risk management." But then he brought up Luna in this tweet of his, which was not an accident, right? That's a very specific piece of imagery. And so that, and then he has this pretty badass line about not pretending to make love after divorce. And it's pretty brutal how that played out after that, because then FTT's price just started going through the floor. And of course, what we found out here is that largely FTX's collateral for the liabilities was denominated in FTT. So as the FTT price goes through the floor, their ability to cover their collateral on their debt obligations goes to nothing. And in the space of like a day, we've seen FTX go, their worth of their business go down to $1. And Sam Bankman-Fried's net worth went from 16 billion to zero. Well, $1 as of yesterday, but now zero as of today. I don't know why that one day made the dollar difference, but it was already zero before, really. So FTT goes to basically zero. And then, a couple of other things happen where they continue to try and save face. It doesn't work because they don't have the money. And they say things that are crazy, right? November 7th, Sam Bankman-Fried literally had a tweet that said, "We have enough to cover all client holdings, and we don't invest client assets," which you would expect. And if that was the case, then everything would be fine. But then everybody continues to panic. Apparently, there's an exchange called BitDAO, where Alameda and all that stuff, they were selling, and apparently there was some kind of agreement that was unspoken between them that they would not be selling each other's stuff. And this is kind of the first wave that kind of sets things off as like, oh, maybe they're trying to sell a bunch of assets to cover liabilities that they can't otherwise cover. And then on the 8th, in around 10 p.m., FTX starts restricting withdrawals, which is, I mean, that puts the lie to everything that's happened up till then, right? They keep saying they have the money, and they clearly don't have the money. And so everybody starts panicking. And then there's this whole thing where Binance they had a letter of intent, non-binding, that said that they were going to buy FTX, try and save everybody. Once again, if this had happened, this would potentially be great for a lot of the users. We had a non-binding letter of intent. And as soon as I read that it was a non-binding letter of intent, I was like, okay, so this is not happening, right? Not only did it not happen, it got crazier than that. They within less than 24 hours of due diligence, they immediately dropped it, which was such a red flag. Everybody knew immediately, hold on a fucking second, because at this point, they were talking about FTX insolvency and billions of dollars in uncovered liabilities. And at that point, people are throwing around numbers, right? Like 3 billion, 4 billion, numbers that potentially Binance could handle, and it would potentially be something that they could get behind. For them to have dropped it within less than 24 hours, they must have seen some crazy shit on that balance sheet. And they cited things like mismanagement of user funds. That's horrific. So that's the first horrific part of this picture. There's another one coming up near the end, which I think we're about to see play out in a big way. So of course Binance backs out of this, a non-binding letter of intent to purchase FTX, because of course not, right? And in the middle of all of this, you should watch this if you haven't already on the Up Only podcast, okay? Out of nowhere, all of a sudden, so they brought Martin Shkreli on for some reason, right? And then out of nowhere, Do Kwon comes on Up Only. Do Kwon, out of nowhere from Terra Luna, just comes on the podcast. And Martin Shkreli's like, hey man, jail's not so bad. And then Do Kwon leaves early. The shit was epic. It was epic, all right? You owe it to yourself. It was ridiculous. That whole podcast was ridiculous. And then Suzu comes out. He's just ducks his head out of nowhere. And then also Justin Sun makes an appearance. Okay, that is how bad this is, okay? All of the villains from the previous seasons are all coming back now thinking, oh, hey, there's a worse guy than us now, which is not how anything works, right? You don't get to cause a multi-billion-dollar, financial breakdown, and then when there's an even worse guy, all of a sudden you're not that bad anymore. That's not how that works. But also, it's kind of crazy because if you look at people talking about all the bad things that have happened this year, Celsius no longer even makes the list, right? People forgot about Celsius. It was horrific. It was unethical, it was wrong, and it was not nearly as bad as FTX. That's how bad this is. This is horrific. This is worse than anything else that's ever happened in crypto. Money-wise, this is worse than Mt. Gox. Percent-wise of the total market cap, it's actually not as bad as Mt. Gox. But money-wise, absolute value-wise, way worse than Mt. Gox. Worse than the Dow hack. Worse than everything that's ever happened in crypto so far, including the other 3 crazy things that have happened this year. And that we're just getting started, right? Okay, so what else happened? There's apparently a Singapore-based, like a government, Temasek entity. Temasek is a Singapore-based government entity that is potentially in talks with FTX for a bailout type thing right now. Justin Sun came out with a multi-billion-dollar credit facility through Tron that lets people potentially withdraw things one-to-one through Tron, which there's probably some illegal aspects to that. I don't think he can actually do that. All of FTX's legal and compliance staff quit, which is incredible. Tom Brady was apparently $660 million in the hole with FTX. And he may have lost everything, which is horrific. But also, there's no way, right? Nobody's that reckless. There is no freaking way. Tom Brady put everything on FTX. Frankly, if he did that, he kind of deserves to lose it, right? I mean, come on, right? That's insane. I feel bad for him if he did that and he lost out, but also that's insane, right? Like, that's your fault. I'm sorry. Anyway, FTX Oh, okay, that was just on Wiki. And then coming back, what else? SBF made a letter to his investors. Incredible. Oh my God, it's brutal. It's brutal. Sequoia Capital, they've written off all of their investments in FTX as a zero. There was some FUD about Tether. At the moment, it seems like maybe they're saying that there's no major exposure, but apparently Alameda is heavily exposed to them. Alameda's site right now is off. Alameda, you can't go on their site anymore. And whether this Tether becomes a real issue or not, I mean, we'll see. And now there's a video of SBF during his whatever, he was testifying in front of lawmakers. He probably perjured himself. He talked about complete transparency. The pic is the video that people have made of it at this point is, I mean, he's going to jail. He's going to jail. There's no way around that. I don't think people talk about his connections with politicians. I don't think that's going to get him around this, because even if they have connections, somebody needs to take the fall for this, and it's going to be him, because whoever takes the fall for this is never going to be free ever again in their lives. He's 30 years old. He's not getting out. I think he shouldn't. There needs to be consequences for this. I think that would be the right thing. He needs to face real consequences. The only thought that this was possible because this keeps fucking happening and nobody ever ends up accepting any consequences. It should happen at this point. Yeah, oh yeah. Over the course of the last couple of days, people started out with $3 billion, $4 billion. How much are they in debt? And more recently, somebody seemed to come out pretty confidently and say 8 billion, which was, I mean, that was way more than people thought. People thought maybe 6 billion maximum, maybe Binance could stretch it. Even that was too much of a stretch. People were thinking 3, 4 billion, maybe Binance could save them. Now we went up to 8 billion. Now it's 10 billion, by the way. It's not 8 billion. Now we think it's 9.4 billion, and the number keeps getting adjusted upwards. There is now a $10 billion hole. Not only is there a $10 billion hole, this includes debts that were owed to other exchanges. So BlockFi has now basically stopped withdrawals, filing for bankruptcy. They have a bankruptcy team that they've now hired. They apparently had a $600 million debt from FTX that FTX couldn't pay back. So now BlockFi is going under as well. And now there's this whole weird thing about regulation where they couldn't stop withdrawals in the Bahamas specifically. So now people are getting KYC'd to the Bahamas. Apparently there's one particularly egregious example of this where one guy named Algod, he KYC'd himself in the Bahamas. Now he's buying people's money that they have accounts on FTX for. And he's giving them pennies on the dollar. And then he withdraws their funds for himself and gives them a fraction, and he's basically scalping people for their own accounts. Once again, probably illegal. He's probably going to have to run from the law after this and go to a non-extradition country, because there's no way he just gets away with that and nobody has a problem with it. These are rich people that he's scalping. That's not going to go well. Apparently there's some talk of a Gemini contagion as well, Gemini Earn at the very least, or Gemini Trading. They've changed some of the language in their website, so we'll see about Gemini. And then whatever, their trading license in the Europe, FTX's trading license, not that they're going to need it anymore, is being suspended. And as of right now, right, as I'm put on the camera and started to record, things are continuing to develop. FTX has now officially filed for bankruptcy. Sam Bankman-Fried has officially resigned, which is really incredible, because if you look at one of his previous letters to investors, he was like, at which point I may resign if people would like me to. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Like, I get that hope springs eternal, but are you kidding me right now? Like, I don't even know what to say. Like, he actually thought at that point that there was a chance he was going to get to keep being CEO of FTX? Like, is he out of his goddamn mind? Is he serious? Sorry. Continuing on, Gary Gensler. So I think this is the big thing. This is the really big thing. So some Republican senator, Emmer or something, came out with a really crazy accusation. So we all know the kind of SBF was the main guy kind of going to Congress and kind of getting regulation set up and trying to guide regulation. And there's now some fiasco going on about him working with Gary Gensler to potentially corner the market through regulatory means, trying to find loopholes to create a regulatory monopoly for FTX. And that's huge, because right now people are talking about, hey, regulation is coming from fucking who, though, exactly, right? Because there's a lot of government agencies getting involved at this point. The SEC, CFTC, for some reason. I didn't know they had anything to say about all this. I didn't, CFTC at most was going to regulate Bitcoin, I thought. But I guess their name has been thrown into the hat at this point. And the DOJ. DOJ is on board, and you know what? If this continues to get shadier and shadier by the minute, the way it has been, FBI are probably going to get on board real soon. Especially if it turns out the SEC chair is somehow involved, may have been working with Sam Bankman-Fried to set up a regulatory monopoly. Because who's going to come in and police the police? If the police are corrupt and it's the SEC, then this rabbit hole is going to go so deep, I don't even know where it's going to end. And then we have all of the extra event speculation that we're going to just go ahead and talk about right now. I mean, some of this stuff is truly irrelevant to the financial element. Like, for instance, apparently Alameda Research was like 10 people and they were all fucking each other, and it was like, and they were all doing amphetamines, and like, it was just a big old meth-fueled orgy at FTX, and that was whatever, right? The harm that they did to other people is truly the what matters. Whatever they were doing behind closed doors is, I guess, crazy to hear about, but also kind of irrelevant. It's just gossip that people like to bring out at this point. Crazy, but, whatever. Compared to everything else that's going on, the speculation about the previous collapses this year, because if you think about it, all the previous collapses, particularly Voyager and Celsius, where FTX came out and kind of bailed out all these bad actors, and people were like, well, are they a good actor themselves? They're bailing out all these assholes. Turns out they're not. And you almost got to wonder. There were some rumors, none of which have been proven, but I got to wonder about them now, especially given that, the character of the people involved has been destroyed. Whether FTX was behind some of these. There was some market movements that people were, conspiracy theorizing about earlier on, about how exactly did Terra Luna go into that death spiral. Like, apparently some big whale entity that we never quite found out about was making huge withdrawals and potentially triggering that. And there were a lot of accusations about Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX at the time. And at the time, we were all thinking, this guy's the golden boy. He's the great hope. There's no way he did that. He wouldn't do that to us. Well, fuck. He might be the reason behind all of this. Like, if he made... Because think about that, right? Because if he made Terra Luna go down, that's then what happened to Three Arrows Capital. And then, with Voyager and Celsius, like, if he was behind some of these previous falls, especially Terra Luna, in order to give himself an opportunity to then go out and, buy everything up at low prices and be the white knight and be the entire industry's crypto, the lender of last resort. I mean, that's huge. And I would have said that this was, a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory nonsense until this all happened. And not only has it happened, it's continuing to happen. This is just getting bigger every minute. It was 3 billion, 4 billion, now 10 billion. Now there might be regulators playing dirty. I mean, now every other exchange apparently had exposure. They're all going down. They keep saying they're not going down, but who knows? So far, it seems like only Binance is immune, but in the previous things, we thought FTX was immune. We thought they were the good guys. We're hoping that players like Coinbase and Binance and Kraken, Kraken did apparently have some exposure, but we're hoping that some of these other people have all been playing ball, not you're abusing other people's money. But who knows now? I don't think anybody is trustworthy. I never thought it was. I will tell you right now, I personally have been, I've been telling everybody, you got to use cold storage. Cold storage. Don't trust anybody with your money. What is the point of crypto if you're still trusting third parties? If you're still putting your money with what are effectively banks that are less regulated than actual banks? That's what these exchanges have become. Then what was the point of crypto? If all you did was get rid of the protections without actually taking any of the responsibilities and actually trying to protect yourself to the extent that that is possible, which is a large extent, then what was the point of using crypto? Just use dollars. Just use your dollars. Just use an actual bank. They're FDIC insured. You've defeated the whole purpose if you keep your money with an exchange. I had a small amount of ETH that I had staked with Coinbase. Apparently, Coinbase now has this thing where you can swap your staked ETH for CB ETH and then trade as you want. I've now pulled all my funds off Coinbase. No staked ETH. That was basically the only option for that before. I don't give a shit about ETH staking anymore. It's not worth the counterparty risk. Everything is in cold storage now, 100%. I had a little bit of Avalanche, which isn't supported natively on Ledger Live. I'm also staying hell away from any VC tokens. We saw what happened with Solana. That's the other thing we got to talk about. Solana went boom. Now with the CPI print today, everything's kind of going up, and Solana is actually up almost 40% in one day. Cool. But we're not done here. Solana is one of the biggest exposures to FTX's Contagion. Alameda has a lot of Solana. SBF has a lot of Solana. They have Avalanche too, so I don't want any Avalanche either. Solana I sold out of a long time ago, particularly because of this massive counterparty risk with the VCs. VCs funding for Solana was touted as this big thing that they wanted. The network has been down 8 times in 12 months, but that's fine. The VCs won't let it fail. What happens when the VCs fail? That is exactly why I sold Solana so long ago. What happens when the VCs fail? The VCs aren't unlimited, and they have exposure to things like what we're seeing now. And when they can't handle it anymore, they're going to pull, they can be forced sellers. They're about to be forced sellers. There was this whole thing with the Solana unstake that ended up not materializing because there was 28 million that was an unstaking and a redistribution type thing from the Solana Foundation. They held that off because they didn't want to spook the market. But just because that wasn't the event where things get unstaked and the price falls doesn't mean that's not going to happen. It just means it's going to be another 3 days, right? Because an epoch in Solana is 3 days. So it's coming. I don't doubt for a moment that it's coming. I would not start longing Solana because of this jump. This is a dead cat bounce. I'm pretty sure. Not financial advice. Do whatever you want. But I think Solana is a really bad play right now. Aptos is also through the floor. FTT obviously going to zero. And I think we're going to see even more contagion than this. I think this is going to get way worse. BlockFi is now going down. That's 1 day later. Supposedly a lot of projects and exchanges and stuff are becoming secretly insolvent as the FTX crisis, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's the entire industry now. The entire industry over the course of just 2022 solidified around a single point of failure, and that point of failure failed. And this is why we need to, this decentralization is just non-negotiable. This is why it is. Going forward, everybody, cold storage. Cold storage. If you can't do cold storage, you don't want the hardware, you can't go out and buy it, whatever. Hot wallet, whatever. You need to be in control. Not your keys, not your coins, period. I lost 0 pennies, not 1 cent to, whatever, Voyager, Celsius, FTX, none of this. You take no counterparty risk. Staked ETH, that's a different thing. Maybe you have to. Do it with Coinbase or something. I don't know. Use a pool at most. Centralized entities are terrible. Have your own money on hand. That's all I can say. That's financial advice. Have your own money. Be in control of your own money. That is financial advice. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how the rest of this plays out. I think the thing with regulation is coming, and oh, by the way, apparently there was a bill that SBF backed to try and kill DeFi, and we'll see how that goes. Apparently some senators want to move forward with it, and so on his way out, SBF may have crippled the entire industry, and he did it while embezzling billions of dollars in user funds. And this is a dark day for crypto. I feel really bad for the people that were actually affected by this. I'm not affected. And, you know, that makes it kind of easier, but I know a lot of people are hurting right now, and, you know, hang in there. I'm sure it'll get better. It'll just take a while. I don't see any sort of recovery happening before 2024. 2023 is going to be brutal. We could have been doing way better after this incredible, you know, CPI print, greatest S&P 500 rally in decades. Could have been the same with Bitcoin. You know, we're having a rally right now. We could have been Bitcoin plus over 40,000, 30,000 at least at this point, if this hadn't happened. But Matic, I think, is personally my best play. I'll put my portfolio up here briefly so you can see where I'm standing right now. But Matic is completely recovered. I don't know how that happened, but they're doing really well right now. And I think going forward, my strategy is mostly just DCA Bitcoin. I'm still staking Cardano. Cardano is held up better than just about everything else in the top 10 right now, because they do it right from the beginning. I don't know what else to tell you. Everyone is starting to realize right now that Cardano was doing it the right way the whole time. So staking Cardano, everything else in cold storage. Cardano is in the hot wallet. Ergo, I have a tiny little bit about that. Also, hot wallet. Nothing on exchanges. Going to DCA Bitcoin mainly. That's my plan, and we'll see. And this is incredible. It's actually incredible to watch. This is a catastrophe of unprecedented proportions playing out in the world of crypto right now. So I guess we'll keep things. I'll make another video, and at some point we got to make a video about 2022, the bear market to end all bear markets. This is the crypto winter. It doesn't get worse than this. None of the previous crypto winters have been this bad. You can argue that Silk Road was proportionately a bigger impact, but I don't know. Like, sure. But also, the institutional adoption end of this is going to be really bad, right? Because institutions were getting on board in large amounts. And we'll see what this has to say for their momentum. It's potentially going to be really bad. All right, this video was already way longer than I intended it for it to be. I'm working on something much longer, which is why I haven't posted very much lately, but we're keeping an eye on things. Like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.